why should we put primary days at the end of the training week? I think this is a pretty I don't want to say complicated, but I think a lot of people tend to kind of overthink this concept where, in my opinion, determining whether or not to put a primary session on squat, bench, or deadlift at the tail end of a week is contingent upon two things. One is predictability going into a meet, and the second thing is the lifters' leverages and just how fatigue sensitive they are. So I'll get into those, and that'll kind of be the bulk of the video. I do have 4 lifters that I'm going to highlight here and give a couple reasons as to why I have their like microcycle organized the way I do in terms of like primary day placement relative to other sessions. But the thing I wanted to start this video off with saying is I do think a lot of coaches and lifters and just people in the powerlifting scene kind of overthink this whole like primary day location and what day should be the start of the week and whatever. Personally, how I view things is the start of the week is Sunday and the end of the week is Saturday, and I just kind of cycle week to week like that, and just view it as a normal week. But in terms of where we're placing that primary session, like I said, it's going to be contingent upon those two things that I just mentioned, right? Predictability and the lifter's leverages in general, like, fatigue sensitivity on things like squat and deadlift. So yeah, like I mentioned, the reason why that I think people tend to overthink this and overcomplicate this concept is just because of influence of other coaches and kind of getting too caught up in certain biases, and overall like the whole end of the week concept or beginning of the week I think can be a bit too subjective and like I guess dependent on the coach's system. That's not the point of the video, so I won't go into depth on it. But more so, what I want to highlight is I don't think anyone should really get too tied to having a certain primary session on a specific day or at the end of the week or at the beginning of the week or whatever. And there's no right or wrong answer here. I'm really just explaining 2 trends that I see within my current roster and lifters that I currently do coach or have coached in the past in terms of this. So, like I mentioned, the 2 reasons why I personally like to, the 2 reasons why I see the need to place primary sessions towards the tail end of the week is because of predictability going into a meet and due to their leverages and general fatigue, like sensitivity patterns. So for the purpose of this video, we're going to be referring to the end of the week as a Friday or a Saturday. Like I said, I personally view the start of the week as Sunday, end of the week as Saturday. I know some people like to mentally view Monday as the first day of the week, or some people like to mentally view the start of the microcycle on a Saturday. Personally, I just view it Sunday to Saturday. So end of the week, as you'll see in these 4 examples, I'm going to be referring to as Saturday. The first example I'm going to run over is my lifter Garrett, and this is a really overall common general microcycle layout that I've been giving to people who are well leveraged for a certain lift. Is I'm going to have the primary session on Saturday and the secondary session on Tuesday or Wednesday. And when I say a certain lift, I really mean squat or deadlift. For the most part, we're going to be talking about squat or deadlift here. Bench is going to be kind of universally talked about in the same sense. So for Garrett, the reason why I have his primary squat session on Saturday is because he's well leveraged for it, and due to his fatigue sensitivity patterns and what we know he responds well to and poorly to on squat specifically, he does well with having a lot of stuff leading into his strongest squat day. For example, on this Wednesday here, we have seen a ton of success pushing hack squats really, really hard, and almost just trying to accumulate fatigue on this day and accumulate volume and total amount of reps done on this session. Having that be high has led this Saturday to success. So ideally, we get as many of those secondary sessions in during a block as we can. And if we were to flip-flop the layout here, where this primary session would be on Wednesday and the secondary squat would be Saturday, we'd be missing out on one of those secondary days that precedes his heaviest primary squat. So he runs 5-week blocks. So let's say we're looking at a week 5 here. He's getting his week 5 secondary squat under his belt and in before his week 5 primary squat. If we had it reversed, he would not. He would have a week 4 secondary squat on that Saturday preceding his week 5 Wednesday squat. So that's a big reason. It's just because we know he does well with that workload. And that's really the one thing I wanted to highlight with Garrett is he does well with work on squat specifically. So that's why we make sure that he's getting all 5 of those secondary squat sessions in before his primary squat. There's a couple of things I can talk about with him, but just with the very blatant trends specifically on squat for him that we've seen, this is the reason for it. We also do not see a whole lot of fatigue overlap on squat and deadlift, so we do have him taking a heavy primary session before a secondary squat. Wouldn't necessarily be doing that for a ton of people, but again, just in terms of squat here, this is what I'm talking about. So a similar deal with my lifter Keon. We're talking about fatigue sensitivity across squat and deadlift on top of leverages. So kind of building off of what I mentioned for Garrett, the theme that I try to continue along for primary day placement relative to someone's leverages, and I've actually made a post on Instagram about this before, maybe around 8 to 9 months ago, is the better leveraged someone is for a given lift. I try to get that lift at the end of the week for the reasons I just mentioned for Garrett, because the better the leverage is, typically the better someone responds to workload and getting those higher quality reps and to fuel that lift, and oftentimes does well with like higher intensity exposure going into that well leveraged lift. And I would like to get as many of those secondary sessions in prior to that lift as we can. On top of just getting the more fatiguing lift meaning oftentimes the lift that someone is not as well leveraged for, out of the way ASAP earlier on in the week before we get that well leveraged lift primary session done, right? So for Keon, here's a couple things to note. We have his primary deadlift on Saturday, and we have his primary squat on Tuesday. Keon is actually well leveraged for both. So it's not necessarily a leverages thing here, and I think that we can actually flip-flop these, but if we did flip-flop these, there would be kind of like this chain reaction effect that would happen, and we would need to adjust more than just that. So the strategy we kind of take here is Keon gets obliterated from a heavy squat. Like he runs a 4-week block, every week 4 squat, pretty much, he's feeling it for a day or two after, like feels destroyed. So the strategy we take for him is we just get that out of the way and as far away from his primary deadlift session as possible. There's a couple other general microcycle layouts we can take for him, like moving this squat session to Monday and moving this to Friday, etc. But the way we have things for him, he does have a busy Monday, so we don't have him trading on Monday. That's a schedule-related thing. But yeah, we get that really heavy squat session out of the way, just for fatigue sensitivity purposes, right? Get it out of the way. He's got a full 3 days to recover before this primary deadlift. And what we do on his week 4 is we pull back and back-end deload. I actually just made a whole YouTube video on my philosophy behind back-end deloading. Week 4, we pull back on this Wednesday deadlift session, and boom, his Saturday comes in super strong every single time. So again, we're lining this up on Saturday. The reason for Saturday is because oftentimes that's going to be the day that someone is competing. Unless you're at a national or world level meet, it's going to be a different story. But yeah, the tail end of the week here, the purpose behind that is to get that really fatiguing final squat session super out of the way before this primary deadlift session. And also for predictability purposes, because of the back-end deload we run on this Wednesday, we know for a fact, okay, hit this heavy squat, pull back on this deadlift session, boom, Saturday comes in super strong. So a couple other examples. One, I have 2 Sophias here that I'm going to run through. The Sophia Wood I'm going to run through on squat from purely a predictability lens, because Keon and Garrett were both more so like fatigue and leverages lens. And then Sophia Fortin I'm going to run through on bench with a higher frequency approach, again, with a predictability lens. And I wanted to pick her as an example because we do a lot of just organization around predictability for her on squat and deadlift, but for her I'm going to specifically talk about bench because I'm not going to be talking about bench for everyone else here. So for Sophia Wood, we saw a really good performance from her at her previous meet. She came in strong across the board. And squat was maybe a touch less predictable than I would have liked compared to training. And the way that we peaked into her last meet in April, I just didn't really like the approach that we needed to take going into meet day because of that primary squat session being in the middle of the week. And she had a secondary squat session on Sunday, and she was also competing on, I think, a Friday. or a Saturday that is. And there was just a lot of adjusting we needed to do. So simply put, for her, I'm using her as an example here because the adjustment we made was moving her primary squat, I think it was on Wednesday before, to a Saturday, knowing that her next meet is going to be on a Saturday. She's going to be competing on the November 1st. It's going to be a Saturday. And we would like squat to come in a little bit more predictably compared to the last meet she just did in April. So the really easy fix was to bring that primary squat to Saturday. It was super easy. And strength is no different. She's been making progress on squat. It's been coming in consistently. Every block is pretty much ending on a very predictable and strong note. It literally is only how can we get this to peak into meet day more predictably. Now, if we knew her next meet would be on a Thursday, I would have that primary squat on a Thursday. So you can kind of see from a predictability lens, it really just matters how we are viewing it relative to the day that someone's going to be competing on the platform. Oftentimes, and this is why I'm including this in this video, oftentimes someone's going to be competing at the end of the week. Again, a national or international meet is probably going to be a different story. But for Sophia, we do have this catered around her Saturday now. But we'll see her old micro layout. She did have that primary squat midweek on Wednesday, secondary squat on Sunday, primary delta on Sunday, and we had to peak into a meet on a Saturday. It was just a bit all over the place, and she did have some schedule conflicts on Saturday that permitted her to not train. So that's kind of the reasoning for having specifically Sophia's primary squat at the end of the week. And finally, to run through my second Sophia, she is my highest frequency bencher. She benches 5 days a week, and she does a whole lot of sets throughout the week. The higher frequency a lift is, oftentimes the more challenging it is to get that lift to come in strong on a given day. For Sophia, we have 5 opportunities for that lift to be the strongest on a given day. Do we absolutely 100% of the time need it to come in the absolute strongest on one of these 5 days? Not necessarily. We're trying to get her to peak multiple times throughout the week. And peak, I mean more so just come in really strong. So for example, this Tuesday is kind of like a second primary day for her. So we're really just looking to get this Tuesday and Saturday feeling strong, feeling poppy, feeling confident, with no issues. However, the predictability that we want within one or more of those days that we want to come in really strong in training needs to line up with the platform. So for example, if maybe she didn't bench on Saturday and we had all of her other days just kind of sporadically coming in strong throughout the week, it really wouldn't be, lining up with a meet from a predictability lens. So we're really just trying to organize bench around that Saturday and strictly keep that primary bench session on that Saturday and then organize things from there. And here's a hypothetical, right? Let's say that Saturday bench is not coming in as strong as, we'll say, this Thursday bench here. In my opinion, I don't know if it would be very productive to just kind of capitalize on the fact that this Thursday is the strongest. In my opinion, I think we should actually actively be making changes to get that Saturday to be one of the strongest days. And like I said, there's going to be multiple times throughout the week that we can kind of peak and have a really strong day and intentionally make that the case. However, if Saturday is, not super strong compared to Thursday, I think the solution here would be to organize programming or the layout of things around actually getting that Saturday session to come in stronger, as opposed to saying, okay, Thursday is coming in strong, let's make that your primary day. Let's put the single on that day. I don't know if that's necessarily the right way to go about it, in my opinion. There are going to be cases where that is the case, where genuinely, I've had lifters in the past where this has absolutely been the case. For whatever reason, there's just that one day of the week, and it could be an exposure timing thing, an outside stress thing, what have you. In my opinion, this is a really, really good reason to have a certain primary session at the tail end of the week and to actively cater programming around getting that session to come in strong. I can also talk about her squat, but again, that would be a little bit off topic in terms of the reason I'm using her for an example here. But similar to Sophia Wood, I also have her primary squat on a Saturday specifically for predictability purposes, because more often than not, and we know that likely Sophia's next meet is going to be on a Saturday, that's the day that we want to line up her predictably strong sessions, aka her primary sessions, with in general, so that meet day comes in just like these predictably strong sessions come in training. So that's going to be pretty much all I got. reminder, two big reasons, in my opinion, are to have a primary day at the end of the week is not just because everyone tells you you should do it. And it's not just because, certain coaches view, this certain framework a certain way to do this and that. I think there should be individual reasoning behind it. And those individual reasons, in my opinion, to have a primary session at the tail end of the week is to complement someone's leverages and their just general fatigue sensitivity patterns, like I used in the examples of Garrett and Kian. And the second reason is for predictability purposes, considering a meet is most likely to happen come the tail end of the week, like a Saturday.